if we put that on just humanity itself and the rapid evolution and expansion, that when we look at it through this lens of removing competition, transcending individual potential, transcending humanity's collective potential, that is an incredibly powerful conversation to have.
That was metaphysical advisor Lauren Zavlunov. She's an oracle and energy catalyst for conscious visionaries, disruptors, and innovators. She's host of the Invisible Compass podcast and founder of the Black Diamond Process, a high-performance accelerator for ambitious visionary men looking to unlock hidden genius, masterfully command their creative destiny, and enjoy expansive sovereign success in all areas of their work and life. This conversation was all about potential and the ways it's being expanded and what the keys to that kind of expansion look like. Here she is now. Hi, Lauren. Welcome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, very excited to be here, Tracy. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I always love talking to you, that's for sure. But I'm truly looking forward to chatting today about being superhuman. And that is something that's really, I think it's something central to both of our work in the world. And it's something that I've become weirdly obsessed with in ways that I never imagined. I'm super into extreme sports at the moment, which is not anything from my life experience at all. I'm not a sporty person. I've never been into even watching sports. It's something that's just grabbing my imagination, and it's really around this idea of like pushing the freaking boundaries of what anybody could imagine as possible. And I'm just like thrilled about finding all these different people in different kind of sports and different walks of life who are doing this in different ways. And it's just blowing my mind.
Yeah, yeah, same. And it's wonderful to watch that there are different lenses in which we can explore this, right? So watching that from that lens, my own experience and your experience as well as being a performer in classical music, there's almost like we're meant to do these superhuman
Exactly what I
things.
wanted to talk to you about today. And I didn't even say it to you before the call. But
Yeah,
we
yeah,
know the space in
yeah.
such an intuitive way, but it nothing to do with like physical feats of endurance. But talk to me about your journey and I'll tell you what mine was like. But tell me about being a musician.
Yeah, being a musician. Oh, that's really interesting. That's a good place to start. Yeah, always very super determined to express and create. And actually, there were three paths if I really looked at it. Was I going to be an artist, a musician, a writer? So all forms of expression were very present in my world. And yeah, music chose me in that sense. And there was just first, it was the mindset of the pit bull. Once I'm fascinated with something, once I want something, once I'm curious about something, it becomes this obsession. And I think we're talking about this sort of what is required of not just being a musician. And it's almost insane to be sitting in a room for, I was up to 8 hours a day, repeating the same things over and over again, but creating different results and exploring the nuance of every note and how my embouchure was and how I could inflect a certain thing and what my interpretation of a certain phrase was. And it was just it is the source of betterment in a way. and the connection to other people, feeling their energy. I think that's one of the reasons why I love music. I could have played anything. I played the flute. And now when I look back on it, I don't know why, but it could have been any instrument. It really was, yeah, pushing myself to that edge. That I think when I go back to the times where I was studying with the top mentors, I was practicing 8 hours a day. I was running a chamber music ensemble. It was the most challenging experiences for me in my
Yeah.
growth, that I thought I could not possibly do more, right? I could not possibly scare myself more, to whether it's play a certain piece on the stage or be able to even implement some crazy passage that I had been practicing. And there were moments where, and I'll bring this back to that superhuman and almost like the super conscious experience. There were moments that I often think of now, when it was when I was playing, it was Lincoln Center. I think it was might have been the first time. And I was playing Stravinsky, and we were playing, I think it was Petrushka, and there's a couple of flute solos in there. And we were also doing Firebird. I don't remember which one it was. This is the moral of the story, of when you've done all this work, you've done all this 3D work, you've practiced, you've installed the muscle memory, and then there's the moment that you just let go. And I think about that moment in terms of where I felt this superhuman divine connection, whatever it was. I remember my teacher, my mentor, after I did the solos, and she was like, holy shit, how did you do that? And I had no answer because I didn't remember anything that I had done. It felt like what I do now, even just in the channeling of that moment. Sometimes I don't even remember what I'm telling people. It is just this extremely deep presence. I think there's a conversation there around the action, the mind stuff. And if we're talking about like athletes, what also musicians, what you do with your body to prepare, and then this otherworldly
Yeah.
beyond that happens when you let go, when you've done the things, when you
Where you, and on some level, you have to let go
Mm,
or it doesn't work. And there's that incredible combination of conformity, of having to do the, like you said, the training and the muscle memory. And like you have to conform in terms of the precision, intonation, tone production, making mistakes, everything that we would call technique
yeah.
is about conformity.
Mhm.
And then none of it has any value unless you're completely individuated and
Yes.
expressing yourself in a way that nobody else does, because ultimately that's where all the value is. And that was a really interesting world for me. But in terms of, I'm just reflecting now on my own personal journey and the clear memory that is coming back to me of how I agonized about dropping my university major
Mhm.
to go into music and doing it. It was so clear to me at the time. My reason to do it was because it was something I had no idea if I could accomplish.
Yeah.
There was nothing in my life that gave me the confidence that I could either get into a university program in music, because I had to quit university for a year and get there to where I could pass an audition. And then having done that, what would have given me the idea that I could have what it takes to have a career, which I did for 25 years in professional symphony orchestras. It was the goal, it was the challenge of it that drew me to that. Of course, I loved music, and I was involved in a little youth orchestra, but literally I had my first lesson on the viola when I was 16.
That's incredible. That's just
And
yeah.
it's not what people do. Like I was at school with
No.
people who had been doing this 4 to 6 hours a day thing since they were 5, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep. Strings. Yeah.
especially strings, it's
Yeah.
not something one generally takes up. in your
Mhm.
late teenage years.
Yes.
And I remember lying on the sofa in my parents' house thinking, oh my God, am I going to do this? Am I going to leave the thing that I'm good at, that I can do rolling out of bed in the morning, which is speaking foreign languages? That's something that comes super easy to me. And I thought, so I'm going to become like a spontaneous translator or something. And I was going to leave this world of where I know that I can excel at this and do a complete left turn into a total no man's land of unknown, no idea if I have what it takes to do this. And that was so thrilling for me. It was completely thrilling. And then I am not somebody of abundant natural talent. I'm just not. I had to work really hard. And again, I was at school with people who had been concert master of any ensemble they were ever in since they were 6 years old, right? Like that there are people who are naturally gifted and then who work hard and obviously who reach amazing heights. And my journey was going to be a different one. But I was one of only 4 people in my graduating class who had landed an audition before the end of the final semester. Like I walked out of university into my first like full contract, full-time job.
Wow. Wow.
And so then there were other kind of challenges because I was not that technically perfect. Like I made up for my technical imperfection with expressive, what you were
Same.
just talking about, right? Like
Same.
that
Yeah. Our journeys are very similar.
I could get into that zone
Yeah.
of now it's time to let go and just be the thing. And so I, yeah, I was not on the like competition track of it just wasn't me. I didn't have the technical mastery for that. But there was maybe there still is, a music competition in Canada where I live called Ecart Grammaté competition in Brandon, Manitoba, contemporary music festival, basically. And they run the music competition every year. And somehow this is a year-long story, but I was at the Banff Winter Cycle. I don't know if you know about
Yeah.
the festival,
Yeah.
but so it's a high level training situation. And while I was working in the Calgary Philharmonic, it's only an hour away to go to Banff, and they offered me a really great situation there. So I was training more with high level teachers or whatever. And I was friends with an amazing pianist, like a world-class pianist who was studying there. And she offered to accompany me for this competition, which was like, never mind the competition, just having a chance to work with her was like totally worth
Yeah.
it, right? And so I sent a tape, which you had to do, and I got accepted to go to the live thing. So we worked. We didn't work super hard because I think we were both in new relationships at the time and our minds were completely somewhere else. But anyway, when I arrived there, I discovered to my complete astonishment that I was the only person who had prepared 3 rounds of music, like the tape and the first round and the finals or whatever. Everybody else was playing whatever they had done on the tape, and they were going to do that again for the final round. And I thought, I didn't even think that was possible. What could that possibly be about? But anyway, as I realized that this was happening, and I asked them if I could just play my final round for the first round and then maybe do it again. That wasn't allowed because I had already submitted what I had to do.
Yeah.
So I had to play my less spectacular pieces for the round that was there. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting disqualified in a weird sort of way because my teacher, my actual teacher from university, was one of the judges. And she went in there saying to everybody, my student is in this competition. Like, how do we handle this? And they all talked about it amongst themselves and decided that she should just behave as she normally would. And it would be abundantly clear when they would tally all the marks, whether she had overrated me compared to what the other judges thought. And everyone just trusted her to be impartial and to everything was going to be above board.
Yeah.
And at the last moment, there came an adjudicator who was not part of that conversation, who just said, yeah, that doesn't work. We can't do that. And by every possible calculation, there was no way that they could include her marks in such a way that I made it into the finals. So even though all of the other judges had placed me in the finals, there was some weird mathematical thing where I didn't get to go on. And I can't even say that it was a disappointment because it was really like a kind of marathon event for me. Like I was
Yeah.
just spent after that anyway. Like I had no interest in coming back the next day and playing now a different round of music, which nobody else had to do. They were getting to have a second shot at what they had already played. But I feel familiar with this level of striving and this idea of the physical part and the mental going through some kind of portal where you just access something different, some next level thing.
Yeah.
It's cool that we both have that
Yeah. Yeah. It's
background.
such an experience. It's a divine stream. And when you're able to, I think that's part of it, of the switch. And I didn't realize this is a thing. A lot of people don't experience being able to just switch, stop being in the physical and
Yes.
whatever thing, right? And or if people experience that, maybe they don't know what that is, or it's terrifying, or whatever that experience is for them. But there is this kind of, I think part of the mastery in that realm is being able to also, yeah, this is big, also ignore the 3D completely. Because if you are talking about, we're going into actually creating and coding your own reality, you must ignore what is actually in your 3D in the moment. Your 3D is a residual of what you have already created in the past. So it's so interesting to watch how our journeys are, and also relating to music and that experience of high performance, that marathon, that also what is happening now, if you think about in terms of both physical, athletics, technology, spirituality, we are reaching these edges. We've had
Yeah.
this conversation, right, about the 4-minute mile, right, where we at first assume this is not possible until someone does it. And I think you and I are working with the people who are on the forefront of this experience, who are crazy like us, who are on the edge, who are innovating, who are pushing themselves into the unknown. There has to be a mastery of the unknown, because otherwise, you know what happens otherwise. It gets, it's terrifying. You can collapse. You will not achieve the thing that you need to achieve if you are only stuck in this one kind of lens of reality, so to speak. So I love this conversation where we're seeing what is happening right now in so many industries, on so many levels, and so many dimensions, that this kind of self-mastery through that marathon is critical. It's essential, right, for us to be able to handle that, to challenge ourselves, and also see the vision beyond the vision. So we thought this can only happen one way. No, actually it's happening just at like radical speeds right now in all areas.
Totally.
That 4-minute mile that's now normal. That's now easy. That's now attainable. So
The cool thing is that it became normal and easy almost immediately.
yeah,
That's the thing that I find so cool. That is those quantum entanglement instruments. That is the rats in Los Angeles learning a maze and the rats in Tokyo being able to do it
yeah,
right away, right? It's a world of where like coincidence or serendipity become the norm. It's
Mhm.
those things are have value in a way that they maybe don't on the collective way
Yeah.
of looking at things, right? And the just the sheer magnitude of the breakthroughs that are happening around us. And I would say that I think that even quantum technology is the technical version of what we're talking about here. It's like when technology has done all of the work and it can now lose itself this in this greater capacity of what's available in the universe. We can work beyond our own understanding. We have the slightest grasp of what quantum technology is. People are just starting to bring it into quantum computing is just so close that they can touch it, but
Mhm.
not close enough that it is a real thing yet. Like oh, it's almost there.
Yeah.
And but we have this concept of that everything in front of us is both a wave and a particle,
Mm.
and that it collapses when we notice it. When we interact our consciousness,
Mhm.
it collapses into something real. And this is magic. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I am just into this because I decided that magic gets to be real in my
Yeah.
world. I
Yeah.
I want this. I
I
want to
agree.
see it. I want to be part of it. I want to
Mhm.
help generate it.
Yeah.
Um, and
1000%.
I'm so enthralled with all the different kinds of it's not about breaking records as much as expanding potential. That's the world that I live in. It's not even about reaching your potential. It's the idea that your potential itself is expanding so far so that, okay, like the big news in the last month or 6 weeks was this Barkley marathons, which I've become obsessed with.
Yeah.
And huge story that Jasmine Paris was the first woman ever to complete these 5 marathon loops. And as I've been binging videos and YouTube and podcasts and whatever about it, I'm understanding how interesting it is that this particular race, maybe more than others, was even conceived of in this way, of that the purpose of it was to challenge what's possible, because it took 10 years for anybody to even finish it the first time. Like, how did they not say, okay, like we picked something impossible, we're going to make it less?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
kept the race going. People kept showing up to it. They kept trying. And then somebody finished the 5 loops incredibly in 60 hours, 100 some odd miles of completely off terrain with no GPS. You have a map and a compass and a flashlight, and you have to run all night in the woods by yourself. Like it's an insanity, right? It's
Mm.
like part orienteering, part scavenger hunt, because you have to find these hidden books that you have to dig up from under a tree and rip out a certain page. And it started out as almost a joke for people to come and have this camaraderie and kind of fight their way through the woods and the brambles and get all beat up and laugh about it afterwards. And it was a community thing. But it took 10 years for the first person to finish. Then there were another 5 years of no finisher. And then somebody else finished. And now it's come to where 5 people finished this year. Out of the same, it's always the same 40 who start.
Yeah.
And last year, I think 3 people finished. And so they change the path every year so that the people from before don't know the new way that they have to go. But they made it harder because 3 people finished last year. And still this year, 5 people finished.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I bet if it keeps going, no matter how hard they make it, like 20 people will finish out of the 40
Yeah.
because there's a different everybody gets to tap into that energy of what's possible. So another race by the same crazy dude who calls himself Lazarus Lake, by the way, and
I
that this
didn't
is
know
so
that.
significant for you and
Wow.
me, right?
Yeah.
This is really
Yes.
bringing people back from the dead. It really is, right? It's a, it's not a, I'm sure that it was intentional on his part,
Mhm.
but this is on a spiritual version, what you and I are doing, right? We're helping people to lose their ego in a certain way that allows them to achieve at 10x or 100x what they
Yeah.
could have done
Yeah.
before. It is an ego death experience, which sounds very scary and nobody wants to go through it, but that's what all of these runners
Yeah.
actually do. So the best expression of this I heard was from Harvey Lewis, who's an incredible American ultra distance runner. Guy with a day job, teaches high school. He's not like a professional sponsored runner who's just doing this all the time, but he does many races, but the one that I'm thinking of is what's called a backyard race, which was invented by this same Lazarus Lake and the idea has spread all over the world. But it's a very short track of 4 point something miles that you keep running. And again, there's hills and forest, and some of it is marked and some of it's not, but it's 4 point whatever miles that you have to finish within an hour. And then every hour the bell goes off and you go again. And you keep doing that until there's only one person left. So there's no second
Wow.
place. There's
Yeah.
no like first, second medals, or nobody gets a medal for anything,
Yeah.
right? You just keep running until there's only one person left. And so it is strategic in a completely different way because on one level, you're only competing against yourself. And on another level, you only have to beat the other person. And if the last person drops off while you still have plenty of energy, you don't get to keep running to see how far you go. You finish when the last person leaves, then you finish your loop and it's done. Harvey Lewis made the world record of this, or certainly the American record. He ran in a race where no one had ever cracked 300 miles. And the whole thing was like, I wonder if someone can do it. I think the previous was 270 or something like that. So they were all excited about 300 miles, 300 miles. And he and two other people, I think, went through the 300 miles. And he said, and the weirdest thing happened after, I don't know, after 60 or 70 hours of running, I was suddenly full of energy like at the beginning. And that is so cool. It's like your physical body, your mitochondria decide to do something different than what they've been doing your entire life.
Yeah.
And you are suddenly like, okay, you could call it adrenaline or whatever, but he went 350 miles. And
Yeah.
so did the other, like the other
Transcendent.
guys dropped off, whatever, like right before that, like three
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
went into the 350-mile category. And he finished like full of energy to the extent that he drove himself home, however many 10 hours or something, and got home at 11 o'clock at night, went out for a run, got up the next morning and did his normal run to school and taught for the whole day. He said, there's no recovery
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's that's what excites me. It's not about making the record. It's like discovering that you push your body in a certain way and then you just let go and there is some completely new capacity that comes online that maybe no other human has ever experienced before.
Yes.
And so then 2 years later he ran that race again, and he didn't just beat his time 380 miles, 450 miles. I probably the only reason that he had to stop was because the second guy finally dropped out. And that's the etiquette of this race, that you don't keep going. But it's you can only do it because someone else is there pushing you, in the sense that you're like, it requires this level of, I don't know what we want to call it, but some level of drive that is related to another
Yeah.
person's energy there
Yeah.
with you.
It's relational in some way.
In some way, it's relational,
Relational transcendence. I don't know. Yeah.
but there is also a very strong tone of changing the meaning of competition.
Yes.
changing the meaning of comparison, which is, I know you and I are familiar with archetypal language, right? But this whole child thing of comparing and competing does not seem to exist in that world in the way that we are used to, such that there's a kind of cooperative feeling where everyone wants the others to also succeed.
Yeah.
There is no glory in being the winner, in the sense that you know that the other person helped you to get there. They are helping each other in very curious. And I read one report of one of those backyard races, going, because you can find them on Google and Wikipedia, whatever, where the last two runners were going, and finally the one guy had to catch his plane back to Europe, wherever he was going, and he just said, okay, I'm going to stop. I can't, I just don't have any more time. And the other guy said, well, then I'll stop too. And so they declared no winner, right? After running for 40 hours or whatever, like it would seem like a big deal that you don't claim the victory because the other guy has timed out of how much he had allotted for the race, or that in the story of the Barkley marathons this year, there's a technicality where the last runners have to go in the opposite direction from where the previous one left. Whoever gets to the gate first, in other words, whoever takes the shortest break time at the end after 40 hours of running, gets to decide. And one of the directions is manifestly easier in terms of the way the hills are oriented, in terms of how tired you're going to be on the way back. And so the guy who had already won this race, or had already finished 3 times, offered to Jasmine that she could take his way of going, that he would have been the next one to go, and he could run clockwise, and then she would be stuck with counterclockwise because she was trying to rest for 60 seconds longer. And he said, I'll wait if you want to go next, but you have to go now. They do these things for each other to help them to succeed, because competition is not a thing. Even at this ultra level where they're all people who are used to winning, but in fact, it is a truth that it's meaningless to be competing with another person, except to the extent that they feed you in your expansion of your potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said.
We'll be back with more of my conversation with Lauren Zavlunov after this short break. I realize that there's way too much of me talking in this conversation, and I'll have to invite Lauren back and let her get a word in edgewise. But I'd like to just add a few words of my own about competition from the archetypal perspective, because this is a great lens to look at the archetypes through. You might think competing would be a warrior kind of thing, right? Like vanquishing your competitors, coming out on top. But it's not. Competition is fundamentally a child thing. The child is one of the 4 shadow archetypes, which means it's part of your unconscious and it's fixated on survival. The other shadow archetypes are prostitute, victim, and saboteur. All of them can find themselves competing in some sense. The prostitute might have to compete in order to have value, to be accepted by their family or by the tribe at large. The victim might have to compete for resources, which they believe are limited. And the saboteur is all about time. So they could be seduced by the idea of being faster, or about winning medals and trophies because acclaim and applause are important to the saboteur. But that's not where the child is coming from. The child archetype is a set of thought patterns and beliefs around identity and hierarchy. It's an unconscious need to know where you stand. Like, who am I compared to you? It's not a question of, do I belong, like in the prostitute archetype, but where do I fit? Where do I stand? What is my place here? Am I bigger or smaller, higher or lower? Do you have more stuff than me? Is it fair? Am I getting my share? These things really matter to the child shadow. And as with an actual child, they feel existentially important. By the way, just as an aside, birth order is something that influences these kind of patterns and can stick with you all your life. The middle child tends to be especially hooked to competition, while an oldest child more commonly has issues with responsibility, especially with feeling responsible for others, while a youngest child likely presents with some version of entitlement issues. So everyone has a child shadow inside them that may be more active or less, but which needs to be mastered as part of the process of spiritual evolution. Meaning, if you want to break into the stratosphere of achievement to really transcend what's possible, you have to let go of making any kind of comparison matter. Like for real, not just saying that it doesn't matter to you, but really knowing in your bones that any feeling of competition is child shadow showing up in your system and it has to go, or you'll be stuck forever with your greatest dream just beyond the limit of your outstretched fingers. It's a limit you're creating for yourself because limits don't exist in reality. So I'm basically positing that these kind of superhuman achievements become more possible, I would say, in situations where there's either a culture built into the environment promoting cooperation in place of competition, or where an individual embraces ego death so deeply, right down to the quantum level, so that not one particle of child shadow is left anywhere in your body clinging to the idea of winning or ranking or comparing. I think people who accomplish this are pioneers in opening portals for everyone alive and yet to come. Because, like I said, once somebody breaks a limit, it becomes normalized in a way that others can now flood through that open doorway and move on to the next limit and the next and the one after that. Now, back to my chat about potential with Lauren Zavlunov.
And I see that if we put that on just humanity itself and the rapid evolution and expansion, that when we look at it through this lens of removing competition, transcending individual potential, transcending humanity's collective potential, that is an incredibly powerful conversation to have, because I think that's where, if we choose, humanity can be headed. There's a lot of people with a lot of, I don't really entertain that doom and gloom, but when we're looking at, yeah, it's like technology, all of this, yeah, think about that. Those visionaries, leaders in all realms, right, are, if we're now evolving to this, where it's not about competition, those around you, it is about pushing you to that challenge, that edge, what is actually possible, focusing on what miracles can you essentially create. That, yeah, that lights me up a whole lot. Yeah.
And it's this idea as part of this evolving process of how we relate to the other. And this idea of your value to me is that you make me better. That is your value to me, not that you have stuff that I want or that I get value from dominating you. It's in what way could we interact so that you expand me,
Yeah.
to some level that I couldn't have gone before. And I think that's the place that you and I get to stand in. And it's so exciting.
It is.
That's why I'm so excited about working at the highest possible levels because because I get to contribute to something at that level
Yeah.
by adding some missing puzzle piece that somebody needs to be better. And then I get to watch that starburst,
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
incredible thing happen,
Yeah.
which for me is so much more exciting than the healing world where I've been for the last 25 plus years. And healing is a great mission. And it always felt very like a sacred trust to me that I was able to use my talents for that. It was what I don't even know what drove me into homeopathy, I'll be perfectly honest. It was like this, it was just an obsession. I became
Mhm.
obsessed with it. I was reading everything I could find, and it was just a lucky thing that my public library happened to have a really great collection of books about homeopathic medicine, like 25 or 30 important books there. And I just read and read until I said, okay, like I have to study this properly because this is so cool. I guess it's just one more example of me being, what would I say, a disruptor of some kind, because
Yeah.
certainly it was not a mainstream kind of thing, but the truth of it like just landed so hard with me. It just really, I don't often say that things resonated in my body, but I felt the same way about all of that archetypal consciousness stuff when I first heard it. It was like a, oh wow, like this is the truth. This is a true thing. Like I just could feel it. And so this has been a transition for me, like away from that healing paradigm into this kind of enhancement paradigm, this activation of something more that that just feels like I want to be on the edge of this. I want to be on the edge of this, of the new human and not the one with implants or whatever,
Yeah.
but just stepping out of that, the old of limit. It's an outdated concept.
Yeah.
There are
Agreed.
just a series of doors that we walk through, a series of portals to the next thing. Yeah, I just love it.
Same. I think it's stepping now into the realm of expansion and casting our eye towards expansion. And when it's a hard thing to articulate, right? Because we do know healing is powerful, but there's still almost, if we tie it to our own individual journeys, it's another layer, it's another peeling back, it's another ego death, it's
Yeah.
another part of the evolution. So it's not that's a wrong thing or a useless thing or any judgment around that, but what's next is expansion beyond measurement. Me also being a disruptor, I'm even seeing, I can't believe I did this. I Googled yesterday, like what's beyond quantum, because I already feel quantum. There's this something here that is, because there's quantum and still a kind of measurement. So what is beyond measurement? I don't have the answers to that, but there's a feeling of where this is going and the now requirement in a way of humanity focusing in this way on expansion, both for the individual and the collective. For me, I work in very much in the individual, which then is just going to be a ripple effect to the collective. And when we're talking about working at the highest level, it's not necessarily levels, right? But it's just with the visionaries, for me, when I think about the visionaries, the innovators, the disruptors, those who are here to really land something new and who are so pushing the boundaries and pushing the edges, when they are well resourced, when they are speaking and moving, creating and literally architecting their destiny, when they are living from that space in a very like just purely sourced, where they've worked through a lot of that. We all go through this experience of what is not me? Where where am I going with even what my desire is? Does my desire for a certain kind of success even come from me, right? When we've stripped that all away and we're like moving into what we are here to do on the freaking planet. And those visionaries are well resourced, and those visionaries are at round tables and in rooms together, and those visionaries are creating together. What does that when we think about the highest level, for me, that's just who are the people who can, number one, handle this,
Yeah,
have done the work to be able to actually handle this frequency and this energy and that kind of self-mastery, because it requires a lot in the unknown. Who can implement these things and create the biggest ripple effect?
right.
That's just really what I'm now interested in, because if we're going to do a thing, let's do a thing. Let's go for the highest, the biggest, not in the sense anymore of this egoic, it needs to just be big, or even when we're
Yeah, it's
talking.
not big for the sake of being big.
Yeah.
It's combining individuals who are comfortable with the frequency of influence already.
Mhm.
It comes easy to them to be persons of influence, and combining that with people who are like on the cusp of being influential because of what they're bringing through, and letting those people be inspirational to each other, like what we were just
Mhm.
talking about. Like, you are useful to me because you make me better in some way. There is not a competition. It's like sourcing the exact people who can make me better.
Yeah.
That's it's what it should all be. But I think that is a real keynote of the evolution of the time that we're living in. When you think about it, what could war possibly be about? It's a nonsense. It doesn't fit the model of what humans are developing into. I want your stuff. I want your area of this little piece of dust that we're all floating around the universe on. Okay. My vision is always that, we are all floating down a river on a boat that is going to end in a waterfall, and we're going over the edge and nobody's taking anything with them. And
Yeah.
we're sitting on this boat fighting about who gets a better view and who's got a nicer room, and it's a complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of any kind of war has really it's so primitive compared with what you and I are talking about. It will be very exciting to see where all of this goes. We
Yeah.
get to check in with each other regularly on this interesting journey.
Yeah. Feels like we live lifetimes in days. That's
Basically,
the speed, right? As at which everything is moving currently.
it
So
is. And that's why it has to be now. It's not just an idea. I think that's why we're doing this. I happen to know it's true of you too, right? We've both burned some shit down that
yeah.
was already a thing, that was already moving along and
Yep.
being helpful, useful, successful to stand in this place and just say, bring it on. This is the next thing.
Bring it. Yep. That's it. That's it.
Lauren, thank you for this. This was a great conversation. I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your presence and to know you, and say a little bit about Black Diamond so people know what you're up to and where to find you.
Yeah. Black Diamond is a crucible. We're talking about visionaries, and my work is with visionary men. So Black Diamond is a process, and it is an experience. So I work with high achieving visionary men who want to collapse time to their destiny legacy. And Black Diamond is that expansion crucible for them to do so. So it includes my metaphysical advising and a beautiful roundtable of other visionaries from multiple industries, so we can create a beautiful impact on the world. And I can be found at recodewithlauren.com and LinkedIn, Instagram at Recode with Lauren. And yeah, and thank you, Tracy, for this fascinating, really powerful conversation. I always love getting in the room with you because there's always, like you were saying, we always make each other better. So thank you
Yeah.
for doing the same for me. Really appreciate the conversation.
This was fun. Thanks again, and we'll be talking.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Limitless is produced by Neil Haley, with music by Danny Columbi. I'm Tracy Poisner. If you're an innovator, a business leader, or a high performer with deep curiosity about the uncharted reaches of your own potential, visit tracypoisner.com for an accelerated pathway toward unimagined achievements and legacy milestones. I'll look forward to meeting you.